It's December and winter is well and truly here. I don't know about you, but some of my plants are struggling for the lack of light, and we'll cover that in this video. But plants do continue to grow in winter despite what you might have read or heard, and that means there is always things to do. So I'm going to show you the things that I'm doing with my plants and why. And we're starting with a string of hearts. So I've got this string of hearts on this shelf here, just underneath this grow light. Having a grow light on top of the plant at the base is important because otherwise they go a little bit bare if you haven't got enough light at the top, so that's a top tip. But as you'll see, these stems are quite long and lanky and they're nearly touching the floor. You'll also notice that they're all twisted as well, which is always the case with a string of hearts. They're an absolute nightmare plant, so I just leave them be now. I don't bother trying to untangle or anything. But when the stems are nearly reaching the floor, you need to get your pruners out like these and just go through and just snip. Don't need to be too delicate about it. So I'm just going to snip along there like so. Take these off. So that evens up the plant. And then the beauty of doing this as well is that the stems will branch out. So you get more than one branch from where you make the cut. So you end up with a nice bushy plant basically. So these should all branch out. And then with these cuttings that we took, we don't want to chuck these out. I'm going to show you what to do with these in the other room. So I have my string of hearts stems, and I've just spent the last 10 minutes or so just unpicking them, untangling them. So I've got individual stem pieces like that. And what we want to do, I want to find the leaves and just cut before and after each of the leaves, sets of leaves, so that you end up with a little piece like that. So I'm going to go through and do that for all of these. So what we are now left with are lots of cuttings that we can propagate from and create a brand new string of hearts plant. And for that, I've got this clear plastic pot, which is a bit taller than your average pot, which is good for the string of hearts to start flopping over, which is what you want. So I've just pre-filled it with Cybertanica soil, and I've pre-moistened it as well. And all you want to do is just lay them on top of the soil. Just try and get the stem piece touching the soil if you can. It doesn't necessarily need to be buried that much, but just go through and press the little cuttings into the soil and they will root dead easily. And this is how we propagate a string of hearts. So in lots of cases, to get a bushier string of hearts, we can take a stem piece that's growing down the side of the pot, bring it back up and wrap it into the soil, just rest it on top. And then at each leaf node, roots will grow into the soil, and that's how you get a bushy crown of the plant basically. But so you can either do that this way, that way with the propagation, or you can take little individual cuttings like this, which is what I tend to do. I just find it a bit easier to place into the soil like I'm doing here. Okay, so I like to pack it quite full because you won't get 100% success rate. You will get a couple that die, but generally, if you pack it nice and full, you get a nice healthy plant at the top. So this will start growing. Once I put it somewhere nice and bright, we'll start growing new stems, new roots, and we'll have a nice string of hearts clone. You might have a Fittonia in your home, like this guy, that you want to clone because it's a beautiful plant, isn't it? But you might be a bit worried about the lack of humidity during winter, so you might put it off until next year. But that would be a shame because we do like to do things during the winter to our houseplants, and I've got a cheeky little hack that will guarantee the success of your cuttings. So I have my Fittonia here, and I'm just locating a nice healthy stem piece just hanging off the side because it'd be easier to cut. I'm just going to cut underneath where a leaf is growing, like so. So I'll get a nice piece like that. Put that to one side, because we don't need it any longer. So there'll be lots of leaves coming out of this stem. So we just want to remove the bottom few leaves, because when we plant these up, if they're in the soil or water, whatever we're doing, then they're going to rot basically. So we just want a nice clean stem piece like so, with some leaves at the top. And then I've got myself a little pot like so, filled with Cybotanica Universal Mix. You can get a 10% discount with the link in my description, by the way, to all their soil. So I've pre-moistened it, and then I'm going to stick the stem piece, without dropping it, in the middle, like so. Press the soil around, and then just got a bit of a leaf broken off there, no big deal. So that's in there nicely. I've already watered it, so there's no need to water it. And then this is where the magic happens. I've got myself a jar. This is an old jam jar. So to prevent it drying out in your home with the heating on, etc., you can pop it onto the lid like so, and then put that over the top and then screw it on. And that has created the perfect humidity environment for that plant to grow roots and then grow new stems. So once it starts growing new leaves and new stems and reaches the top of this container, you can just simply take it off and then let it grow as it normally would. So in winter, our plants can start to look a bit ropey, can't they? Can I get an amen? And that's exactly what is happening to this Calathea elder grass. As you can see, it's got some floppy yellowing leaves. A lot of them have gone crispy brown like that one. And just generally it's looking a bit like a dog's dinner, isn't it? And to a beginner, they might see this and want to chuck it out into the bin. But a quick tidy up and we'll get this guy looking its former glory. And I'll show you what to do. And here she is, as easy as that, looks as good as new. So I took off a fair few amounts of leaves, anything that was yellow or browning, I just took off with my snippers. I showed no mercy whatsoever. So I think the problem with this plant was that it was too bushy. So getting rid of all the leaves that were dying off has opened it up, and it's created more airflow to get into the plant and more light as well. So we should now start to see lots of new growth. There is new growth coming through in the middle, which is a good sign. It's not dying, but just basically I hadn't got around to pruning it back. It's looking much healthier now. I've got my Monstera albo here, which is a beautiful but slightly problematic plant because of the large white sections going brown, but that's a story for another day. But this guy is looking a little bit floppy, a little bit unsupported, isn't he? So I like to support all my Monsteras these days, give them something to climb up. So they've got these arrow roots at the back of the stem and they want to attach onto something to then climb up to support as they grow higher and higher, taller and taller. So this guy needs support and I've got just the thing for it. A support system that I absolutely love, that I use on lots of my plants, is this leaf trellis. This is called the Zella. You'll be able to find it on their website. You get a 10% discount with my link in the description. But I like using these to support my plants because it looks attractive. But where should we put the stake? So basically a Monstera will have a front and a back. The front is where the leaves will face, and then the back is where the arrow roots will come out of the stem. And that's where you want the stake to be, up against the arrow roots. Sometimes it won't look quite so black and white because, as in this case here, I've got my two arrow roots facing kind of behind me now, and then the leaves are kind of veering off to the side. That must just be where the light has been shining on it, facing that way. But to correct that, all we need to do is put our stake in the soil up against where the arrow roots are coming out of the back of the stem, like so. There you go. So it's dead easy with this leaf trellis because they've got nice feet to put into the soil that are rubber coated. And then just to make sure that the plant knows that it's there, I like to tie it on using this green Velcro tape that you can just buy online from Amazon probably. So I'm going to pop that through that hole there, anchor it nice and tightly, like so. There we go, much better. So now that plant knows that this trellis is there and it will start attaching its arrow roots to the wood and it will start growing taller and taller. On this shelving unit behind me, I have my spider plant, which is looking absolutely glorious. So this guy is fairly new to the home. I've had it about 3 or 4 months, something like that. And it was flowering the other day. They've since gone by the wayside now. First time a spider plant has flowered in my home. But as well as the flowers, they're also producing lots of these pups all around the plant, little baby pups that sprout from the mother. It's quite an interesting feature of this plant. So you can either leave them on the plant, which is quite a good thing to do because they look quite nice, don't they? Quite interesting. Or you could do something else with them. So with the pups that this plant is growing, we can easily cut these off to grow new spider plants. That's basically what these are for. So we can take a couple of cuttings. I'm just going to do 2 into 1 pot, like so. We don't need that anymore. So if you look on your spider plant pup, you should start to notice the beginnings of some roots growing at the bottom of where these the leaves are coming out of these pups. So I've got myself another pot filled with Cybertanica soil and I've pre-moistened it. Just grip my stick. It's just dead easy to propagate these. It's the easiest thing you can do with your houseplants. Just make a little hole like so and then pop that in there to make sure that the bottom of that pup has good contact with soil. And that's it really, dead simple. So I'm gonna put 2 in here, like so. And that will grow on. I'll put that somewhere nice and bright and that'll grow on to be a nice healthy spider plant. If you're struggling with things like yellowing leaves, brown leaf tips or wilting and you're not sure why, then make sure you download my free troubleshooting guide, which is linked in the description to this video. Goes through all the common problems and why they happen and then what to do about it. And you'll also get the opportunity to sign up to my weekly newsletter, Houseplant Digest, which is a lot of fun. So make sure you check out the description. Winter can be a really tricky time for sun-loving plants like succulents, cacti and aloe vera, for example. I've got my Aloe arborescens or Aloe candelabra, I think it's called, here, which is an interesting plant with spiky leaves, but it lives about 1.5 to 2 meters away from the window, so it's not getting enough light at the best of times. And now that we're heading into winter, it's starting to look quite stretched and leggy. The long central stem at the base going all the way up here is looking quite leggy. And if I don't do something about it, it's going to start to get a bit top heavy of it, I think. So we need to correct this now. Now, it might look drastic, but you can get your large pruners like so, and then, I'm just going to get this out of the pot. You can go quite low down on the plant, if I can get in there, like so, and chop its head off, like so. And then we can remove these lower leaves to expose the kind of stem piece. So aloe veras, you can reset, or Aloe arborescens, or whatever this is called, but you can do the same thing to aloe veras as well. You can reset them like this when they start to get a bit leggy. They will grow roots from the stem piece. So I'm just removing these leaves until I'm left. Just want to tidy this up a little bit. There we go. Do one more leaf. There's one there that's just... Okay. So we have a piece like that now, with the stem exposed. So you should really let that callus over for maybe a day, maybe even 2 days, just to let that dry off. Because plants in this family don't like to be overwatered. And because that's quite an exposed, fleshy stem piece, it might start to rot because it's very moist. I'm feeling it in my hands. But for the purpose of this, I'm just going to show you how to repot it. So I've half filled a pot here with soil. I'm just going to hold the stem piece and then just fill around. Dead simple. Quite low down, like so. So like I say, it will grow roots dead easily. Then it'll continue to grow taller and taller. So this is something I like to do to my succulents as well. I like to kind of reset them normally every year, just to stop them from becoming so leggy. So fill that up with soil. There we have it. A nice compact plant now. So I would give that a water. As I repot any plant, I always give it a water, drink of water, just to make sure that the stem piece settles into the soil, makes good contact, and then it'll start growing roots. I'll put that somewhere bright. I have a happy new plant on my hands. If you're a subscriber to the channel, then you would have seen me unbox this bad boy in a video about 3 or 4 months ago, something like that. This is my Monstera Thai constellation that I got from Amazon of all places, and it was in good condition. There was some thrip damage on some of the leaves, but I think they eradicated that before they sent it to me, because I've not noticed any more damage. But this guy I stuck on my fireplace hearth here, which is a good 1.5 to 2 meters away from that window here in my living room. And that's not enough for a Monstera. If you have a light meter or a light meter app on your phone, then you want really 500 foot candles as a minimum for your Monstera. So this plant wants to be nearer to that window. And you can tell when your Monstera is struggling for light, when the petioles become long like these have here. The petiole is just the piece that links the stem to the leaf. If they're getting long, like this one here, then that means that that leaf is trying to get that to that light as much as possible, and it's stretching the petiole to try and get there. So really, in an ideal world, I would move this even nearer to that window, or I would put a grow light maybe up here, just shining down on this light to give it the 500 foot candles that it needs. But I'm not going to be doing that because I'm moving in the next week or so, and there's big west-facing windows in my new house. I'll be able to plonk it somewhere much brighter. Something that I absolutely love to do is to create mixed planters. So I've got one on the go in my living room already. I'm going to show you how to do it with some pothos and Philodendron plants. So they want to be plants in the same family. So I've taken cuttings of various plants. I've got my Philodendron, my pothos devil's ivy cutting here, a neon pothos, Philodendron Brazil, a pothos enjoy, and then a satin pothos. And I think these will look very nice together in the same plant. So basically we're propagating, but we're putting multiple different types of plants into the pot. So we just want to tidy up these cuttings basically. So I think that's going to be too big. So I've cut just underneath a leaf node, and that's where the roots are going to develop. There's a leaf attached to that piece at the bottom, so I'm going to discard that so it doesn't rot. And that's the first one. So I'm going to pop that into my pre-filled, bit too long. Pop that into my pre-filled pot with Cybertanica soil. Like so. So that's one. And then next, my neon pothos. So again, probably don't need that. Discard these lower leaves. So roots will grow at each point here, here and here. So again, and pop that into this pot, like so. Philodendron Brazil, which is a beautiful variegated plant. What we can do with this, I'm going to cut that there, get rid of that leaf, then pop that into the pot as well. Like so. So for these plants, I'm not planning on staking them. I'm planning on just having a bushy plant that overflows each overflows the pot basically. And then my penultimate plant is this satin pothos, which is a beautiful plant. Where's the stem? Get rid of that leaf. Is that a leaf? It's going to be a bit awkward. There you go. And I'll pop that just in there. Like so. And then the last one is my pothos enjoy. So like before, oh, nearly cut my hand off there. I'm going to remove the lower 3 leaves on this one. Roots will grow out all along there. And I'll pop that in this side here. Make a hole with my finger. There you go. There you go. Doesn't look perfect now, but once it starts to grow roots and new stems, this will really bush out. Just move that to that side. So you don't need to propagate in perlite or water. Propagations can happily just go straight into soil and you're not having to mess around with transferring from water to soil. So this is a good option. So I think when this grows out, it'll be a nice little mixed pothos philodendron planter, and I'll keep you updated in future chores videos. When you buy a training plant in the store, such as this lipstick plant here, which has finished flowering for the season, they often come in these rather ugly plastic pots with plastic hooks, don't they? And I've got mine hanging up here, but I think I can do much better than this. And the solution to that is to get one of these. This is a macrame hanger, or a macrame hanger, however you want to say it. I think it's a French word. But it's going to look much nicer in here than it does in there. So I'm going to make the transformation now. And there she is, looking much nicer in a macrame hanger, much nicer than the old plastic hook that they gave me. So it was a bit of a challenge trying to get this plant into the macrame hanger, because you do kind of need to get it evenly in there so it doesn't flop over to one side. And I did nearly drop it on a couple of occasions. But you're never going to get it perfect basically, just get it in the macrame hanger and then move on basically. So we're heading into winter, and in my climate here in Sheffield, I get about 6-7 hours of daylight a day, which isn't a great deal to be honest. And for fussy plants like Alocasia, that's not enough, and they tend to go dormant. That's what always happens to my Alocasias in my house. The leaves go yellow, they die off, and then they come back in spring. So to combat that, and if you have Alocasias in your home and you're not getting the light that you need in the winter, then I recommend sticking them under grow lights, and do that now before it's too late. Because once they start to turn, they'll just continue to go downhill basically. So last year, my Alocasia Frydek lost all its leaves pretty much. But this year, since putting it in this spot, much better. Look at that. Big leaves. This is the biggest my Alocasia Frydek has ever been. They look really healthy. No yellowing or dying leaves whatsoever. And there's new growth coming out of the base of the plant from corms that are in the soil. So that's looking really healthy. And then also, next to it, I've got the offspring of that mother plant, little Alocasia Frydek, that I put into this pot, I think it was spring. So for a plant this small, this would definitely lose its leaves in winter in my climate. But putting it under this light that I have on for 12 hours a day, it's keeping its leaves. And there's a new leaf there as well, which is good. Normally in my climate, in the winter, it doesn't produce any new leaves. So the fact that there's a new leaf coming through is good. Looks like that one's on the wayside, but as long as there's 3 strong leaves there. And then I've got my Alocasia Dragon Scale that was looking like an absolute dog last winter. I think it was down to 1 crispy leaf. But since moving it here on this IKEA cabinet, much healthier. No yellowing leaves inside. Very handsome plant. So you can get a 25% discount off Sansi Light with the link in my description, so check it out. Something that I love doing, 1 because it's thrifty and 2 because it looks nice, is to repurpose containers. So on this shelf here, I have got one of Mrs. Sheffield's favourite items. It's a little tin, the Marquise of Queensberry selected blend of Indian tea. So it's an old tea tin, God knows when it was from. I don't know where she got it from, but she has it displayed on there because it's quite a retro look, isn't it? It looks quite interesting. But I reckon we can turn that into a plant pot. Why not? So there's no drainage holes at the bottom, and that is okay. A plant doesn't have to be in a pot without drainage holes. I do recommend it in my videos because I'm normally talking to beginners on the channel. So to avoid them drowning their plant, I always say put them into a pot with drainage holes. But if you're a bit of an intermediate, you've got a few plants and you're good at watering your plants, you know how much to give, got a bit of experience, then you can just put it into a pot without drainage holes. So that's what I'm going to do here. I've got this little snake plant here. That looks quite nice there, but I reckon we can combine the two and create something much more aesthetic. I've got my container and I've just filled with soil, Cybertanica soil, universal mix, and I've put a little indentation in the middle using the pot of the spider plant to allow me to get the plant in there a bit easier because it might be a bit of a struggle otherwise. So I'm just going to pop this out like so, and then I'm simply going to just pop that in and then give it a shake to get the soil around the root ball. And I just need to top up with some more soil, which is what I'm going to do now. It will make a bit of a mess, but never mind. Press that in, just so that the existing root ball has good contact with the new soil and the new roots will start to grow into it. So you might be thinking that the pot is probably a bit too big for the size of this plant, and that is a valid concern that you have, my plant friends. But because we're more experienced at this plant game, we know that we don't need to water this plant that much. So we're going to keep the soil relatively dry at all times, particularly for this snake plant. Okay, so I think we're nearly there, like so. Okay. So I do have a bit of a mess on top, but I think that all adds to the appeal, doesn't it, of this rustic container. There we go. And that looks quite nice, doesn't it? Now you might have read or been told that the plants in your home stop growing completely in winter, but in my experience that's not really the case. Even for me here in Sheffield, where I only get 6-7 hours of daylight a day in the winter, they still continue to grow, they still continue to push out leaves. So if you've got normal indoor temperatures and you have some daylight, then they will continue to grow. So therefore, it would be a big mistake to stop fertilizing your plants. So basically, I feed my plants the same, more or less all year round, because I do get growth. So I put a cap full of fertilizer into this 6-litre watering can, and I add a bit of water conditioner. I've repurposed this dropper that I got from Mrs. Sheffield. I put some water conditioner in here. So I put a dropper full of that in there as well, just to protect my plants, my fussy plants like Calathea and spider plants, against brown leaves. Then I fill it with water and I'll go through and fertilise my plants as normal. I have with me here a beautiful Poinsettia. I'm sure you recognise it because these are ever so popular in the lead up to Christmas, aren't they? So I've got with me here a nice pink variety. It's a little bit early in the season for me as I'm filming this, so I couldn't find any red ones. So I picked up this pink one. So these guys are often found at the entrance to the store, aren't they? Because they want the store wants you to go in through the entrance, be dazzled by these beautiful, colourful bracts, and then purchase it basically, which is what I did for this guy, £7.50. But the problem for the Poinsettia is that that spot near the entrance to the store is the worst place for it because they hate cold. They hate getting blasted by the cold outside. And when they're sat on the entrance to the store, they're going to get blasted by cold, aren't they? So when you're choosing one of these, you want to make sure you find one that isn't in that spot basically. If they are, then kind of steer clear of it. And when you are choosing a Poinsettia, just want to make sure that there are no yellowing or blackening leaves, because once the poinsettia starts to go downhill, there's no saving it basically. And normally yellowing leaves and black leaves is a sign of cold damage. So the bracts may look beautiful on the top, but when you unravel it and get it home, it might start to deteriorate, because my poinsettias normally always die off. Don't know about yours. So we're going to look at this guy. He's wrapped up with a nice bow. We're going to look at him because I can see there's some yellowing. So this guy was sat at the entrance from a local store. I'm going to get him out. Sopping wet, so obviously been watered a bit too much, which is never a good thing for a poinsettia either. And as you can see, it's in a bit of a state, isn't it? So you just want to be sure to check things like yellowing leaves. This is a real bad state. Got some mold issues and stuff. So this guy, he's on death's door, unfortunately. Really not in a good state whatsoever. So I don't think there's going to be much that I can save this plant. I'll be surprised if it lasts until Christmas, to be honest. Got some moldy leaves in here. So obviously this cellophane wrapper is not the best thing for it. But if you do manage to find a poinsettia that isn't living somewhere cold in the store, and you get it home, first you want to make sure that the shop assistant wraps it up nicely to protect it from the cold on the way home. And then when you get it home, just put it somewhere nice and bright and warm, away from any doors or windows that get opened. And it should last until Christmas at least. So this is my new bird of paradise. I don't know too much about the plant, so I've got some helpful tips from some planter YouTuber friends of mine, and they gave me some good tips that I'm going to share in this video. So this guy is a flowering plant. That's the aim of the game with this guy, to get it to flower, which can be quite tricky. It needs a few things to do so. Number one of them is being fantastic lights. They need bright, direct light and lots of it. So this is why I've put it in my conservatory at the back. So this is a south and then west exposed room. So it's going to get light coming from there and going all the way around and then setting in the garden. So you should get lots of light, especially in spring and summer. And that is ideal to get the flowers to come through. When I brought it home and I sat it in this spot, I did give it a thorough check over for pests. You don't want them spreading to your other houseplants. So I've given it the all clear, apart from one thing. There are a couple of white blobs, just only 3 or 4 white blobs on the leaves that are suspicious to mealybugs. They don't seem to be spreading or growing or anything like that, or even moving around. But just to be on the safe side, I've got some surgical spirit and a Q-tip from Mrs. S. So you just dip it into the Q-tip and then blob it onto the suspect white blob on the leaf. So there's a couple there, there was one here. And that will kill the mealybug if it is a mealybug, and it will stop it from spreading. So I'm going to be extra vigilant and just checking over this plant every day just to see what's happening with the white spots on the leaves. Watering is pretty much like any other house plant, just let it dry out in between watering. So that's what I've been doing, using my moisture meter when it's dry, giving it a good drink. And then when you buy a plant from the store, it's quite a big specimen. So you just want to look at the pot and actually see how many plants you've got. More often than not, a plant this size, you've probably got 2 plants, which is exactly what I've got. I've got 2 in here, which is great because it's a nice bushy specimen, but it can be problematic further down the road to get it to flower. If you've got your plant in a nice sunny spot and you've had it a few years and you've just not got it to flower, then just have a look at the pot and see how many plants you've got. If there's 2 plants in there, they're basically fighting for nutrients. So you might want to just separate them and put them into their own pots so that they can feast on their own nutrients and hopefully flower. I'm not going to do that for this guy because it's a new plant for me and I don't want to stress it out by repotting it basically. Most of your orchids at home have probably finished flowering. I know mine have pretty much all finished flowering. There's a couple of that still have a couple of flowers hanging on for dear life, like with this guy here. There's a flower there and an unopened one here. So when they finish flowering for the year, your focus should switch to looking after the leaves and the roots as best as possible, setting them up for success for the next flowering season. So most of my orchids are doing just fine. New leaves are coming through out of the crown of the plant, which is exactly what you want to see. But for some reason, this guy has got a big old yellow leaf. So I reckon this guy needs a bit of a rehab. You don't need to be too alarmed when you see something like this. It just means you need to pay a bit of attention, and that's what we're going to do, set up this guy for success for next year. So this orchid, I think what I'm going to do, pretty much at the end of its flowering season, I think. There's only a couple of flowers left. I think it might be drawing on might be drawing too much energy from the plant. So I want to basically cut it off like so. I'm going to take this yellow leaf off. Just pull it off. The encouraging thing is that there is new leaves coming through the middle, so that's a good sign. I'm going to get it out of the pot. So I think I did repot this guy not too long ago. So I did cut off some of the roots, and they do still look reasonably healthy. Maybe a little bit dry, maybe that was the problem. So I'm going to put it back into the pot like so. Because the roots felt quite dry, what I'm going to do, pop the plant in there. I've got some water here with some hydroponic fertilizer, just to give it some nutrients. I'm going to put in quite a lot of water, just to give it a good saturation, a good drink, like so. So it's quite high up. That way, the orchid bark will get nice and wet. I'm going to leave this in here for about an hour. So it's going to get fully saturated. The roots are going to get fully hydrated. Then I'm going to discard the excess water and I'll put it somewhere nice and bright. And then maybe I'll clean the leaves as well, actually, because they're a bit dusty, so it's stopping it from photosynthesizing. And then with any luck, this should bounce back and we should start to see new growth coming through the middle. But as always, I'll give you updates in future chores videos. If you saw my November chores video, I'll leave a link to it at the end of the video, just in case you haven't, then you would have seen me plant this guy, the Amaryllis bulb. So this guy is a bulb that will flower beautiful red flowers. So this one is just starting to open up. You can just see the two flowers are just poking out of this stem. This one is yet to open up. So I reckon another week or so and this should be in full bloom. So it has taken a bit longer than expected. I was hoping to get this all opened up by Christmas, but it looks like it's going to be January. So that one is fine. I also did two more. So if you planted your Amaryllis at the same time as me and it's still not opened up, then don't be too alarmed if growth is a little bit slow, because I've got these two as well. I did these at the same time and they're much further behind that one. I'm not really sure why. It must be to do with light and temperature maybe. So this one is just starting to show its bulb poking out of the top, so very slow. It's been in there a good couple of months, and this one, it's got the leaves, and now the bulb is just starting to show itself. So I'm not really sure, it must be the lights in my old house. They were in different rooms. I think that one was in my dining room, so it was getting lots of early morning sun, and these two were in my living room, I think, not in as bright a spot. So if they're a little bit slow, then don't be too alarmed, because mine are too. Winter can be a fantastic time to experiment with putting some of your plants in brighter light and even full sun exposure, which is what I'm doing over here. So I've got this spider plant here, which would normally thrive in direct sun, but it lives here on this shelf that's getting south and southwest exposure all day long, but it's gentler sun in the winter. So we can kind of train our dragon to enjoy some direct sun during winter, spring, and then see how it gets on through to summer. If it starts browning, then pull it away and put it somewhere a bit less bright. But this guy's absolutely loving life. Lots of new leaves are coming through the middle, so it's very happy. And it's also got lots of these pups coming through as well. So I'm going to continue to put it there and keep an eye on it through to spring and summer. And I've got my new plant, my Schismata glottis, which I still can't get my head around how to pronounce. It's an absolutely gorgeous plant, and this naturally lives under the canopy of larger trees in its natural habitat, so it only gets dappled sun. So it's a new plant for me, so I'm experimenting with putting it right here in this sunny southwest exposed spot to see how it gets on, and it seems to be happy as Larry. Lots of new leaves coming through the middle. And also I've got my Monstera albo that I would normally put in kind of medium light because it's got the white parts of the leaves that I don't want to damage through direct sun. I'll put it in that spot to kind of experiment with it getting direct sun during the winter months and through to spring and summer, and let's see how it gets on. It's pushing out a new leaf, so it's clearly happy in that spot. So just keep an eye on the plants that you move into your sunnier spots in winter, and then just kind of see how they get on in spring and summer, and maybe they can stay there. Did you know that you can take a begonia, Rex begonia I think this is called, you can take a leaf and make multiple plants from it? Strange but true. I'm going to show you the full process. I've only done this once before and I've had limited success with it, so I'm going to try it again. All you need to do is take a leaf at the base of the plant, pop that to one side because we don't need it anymore, and then from this one leaf we can grow lots of begonias. So what you need a chopping board like so, and a nice sharp clean knife. So on the back of a begonia leaf there'll be lots of veins. What we need to do, take our knife and just make incisions along the veins, and at these points is where new plants are hopefully going to root and then start to grow. So you just want to cut into the main veins a couple of centimeters apart. Okay, so I've made lots of incisions. You don't need to worry about damaging the plant too much. And then you want to get a tub of soil like so with a lid. A lid is important to keep the humidity in because they do need humidity to start growing successfully. And then you want to take your leaf and you want to lay it onto the soil. I'll cut that back so it fits in. Lay it onto the soil so it has good contact, and that's when the good contact is going to start the root making magic. So just press that on there like so. Just trying to make sure as much of that leaf has good contact with the soil. You can pin it into place as well if you wanted to. You won't damage it too much. So that's good enough. So I've just buried the petiole into the soil to hold it into place. So that is hopefully good enough. And I've got my watering can down here. I just want to give the soil a little bit of a drink. Like so, and then you don't want water to sit on top of the leaf, so you can use this at this point to just get excess water off the leaf like so. There you go, that has good contact on soil. And then importantly, you want to put the lid on and then put it somewhere nice and bright, not in direct sunlight because that will just turn it into a crisp. Just keep on top of the moisture, don't let the soil dry out, keep it nice and moist, maybe spritz it with a mister, and then open this up every maybe 4 or 5 days, something like that, just to give it a good airing for 10 minutes or so. And then hopefully, where you made the incisions in the leaves, new begonia plantlets will start growing, and then you can pick them out and pop them on into soil. I'll keep you updated if this is successful for me in future chores videos. Winter can be a bit of a slow time for looking after our plants. So I always use this as an opportunity to kind of look around my home and kind of see if there's any areas where I can display more plants, much to Mrs. Sheffield's delight. So I've got this area here that's looking a little bit bare for my taste. I've got a plant stand with an Aglaonema sat on top, but above, I reckon we can put a plant here, and I've got just the thing to do that. Right, this next job is going to be a little bit tricky because I've got the cactus, golden barrel cactus, which has grown quite big. It's kind of snuck up on me how big this has grown. I bought it 2 years ago, I think, and it wasn't anywhere near the sides of the pot, but now the spikes are hanging over the side of the pot. So I think it needs an upsize, otherwise I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. So it's always tricky repotting a cactus, isn't it? So for the job, first of all, it's going to go in this terracotta pot, which I think will look quite nice, and it's a bit of an upsize. And it's got a wider bit at the top for the spikes to hopefully sit in there proudly. So for the job, I've got a couple of chopsticks if I need to kind of maneuver it somehow. I've got some rubber tongs and some oven gloves. So, where to begin? I reckon we start by trying to get it out of its porcelain pot. It's worked out quite well so far. So I bought this for £6. It was only a little thing when I bought it, and it's grown quite handsomely. So I'm going to try and tip it upside down. And voila. So far so good. Now, so I've pre-filled this pot halfway with Cybotanica's cacti and succulent mix. So now I'm just trying to size it up. I think that should be okay. There we go. Yeah, that fits perfectly. Just get that in the middle with my tongs. This is going surprisingly well. I thought I'd have a lot more difficulty with this. I've got my old scooper from IKEA that I always like to use. So I'm just going to fill around the edges now. Okay, so I filled around the edge with the soil. I do like to get my finger in there and press it around, but I can't really do that, which is why I was using the stick. So I've tried to keep it more or less at the same soil line, at the same level, so I've not buried it or sitting too proudly. But I think that's a pretty good job. I think over time it probably will settle, and I might have to go in with a bit more soil just to top it up around the edges. And even with a cactus, I do like to water it in just to make sure that there's good contact with the new soil around the plant. Just to settle the plant into the pots, basically. So I do like to use terracotta for cacti and succulents because it does dry out quickly. Normally for aroids or any other tropical plants, I would stay clear of terracotta because it just dries out far too quickly. But for cacti, it is perfect. There we go, give it a good drink. Can't really give it too much because it will come out of the bottom like it is starting to. And that is that cactus, nicely repotted, all in proportion. I'm lucky enough to have lots of Monsteras in my collection. I've grown some from seed, I've also bought some, I've also propagated some. But if you don't have lots, you've only got one in your collection and you want to multiply it, then I'll show you how. Propagating a Monstera is pretty simple because it's quite easy where you need to cut. So there'll always be some aerial roots coming out of the back of the stem. So all you want to do is to cut on the stem underneath an aerial root or two. So when you're looking at your stem, it's also a good idea to look for these growing eyes because that's where the replacement stem is going to grow from. So we're just going to chop its head off and it's going to need to regrow a new head basically. And I can see one here starting to emerge. That's going to be the new growth point. So we don't want to cut that off basically, off the remaining plant, because we want this to grow. We want to get a propagated piece, and then we want this, what we've cut off, the mother plant, if you will, we want that to regrow a new stem, so we end up with two. So nice, sharp, clean pruners. And I'm going to cut just in between that node and that node, like so. And I'm going to cut that aerial root off. So we've got a piece there with 4 leaves, and we're left with a stem piece here, and hopefully that will regrow into a new plant. So we can pop that to the side. So this guy, 4 leaves is probably a little bit too much for it, so we can remove that leaf and that leaf. So we're just left with 2 leaves, like so. And they look very nice as well, don't they? Nice fenestrated leaves. And then you can pop that, because it's got aerial roots already growing, these will continue to grow and they'll develop into the main root system. So you can use whatever you want to propagate. You can even put them into soil or to perlite, or you can just put them into a glass of water like so. Put down a nice bright spot, preferably out of direct sunlight, and it will grow roots in maybe 4 or 5 weeks, something like that. It is quite slow to grow roots on Monstera. And then when they're about 4 or 5 inches long, we just pop them on into soil, and this stem piece will continue to grow. You can see the bump on the stem or the petiole where the new leaf is going to start to emerge, and that's where the new leaf will grow from. That is how to propagate a Monstera. If your plants aren't growing as much in the winter months because of the lack of light, and you haven't got as many grow lights as me because you're not as obsessed, then it can be a good time to kind of get them ready for the growing season of spring and summer. So we can do things, particularly to climbing plants like this Philodendron verrucosum. So this is a young plant. This is a cutting that I took from the mother plant a long while ago. I've been growing it ever since in perlite. It seems to be a bit of a slow grower. But anyway, this guy is small at the moment. It looks fine, but it's already starting to wobble a little bit. And with Philodendron verrucosums, as they grow taller, they tend to get a little bit top heavy, and that means that they start to fall over. The stems are too thin to hold on to their weight. So this guy will need supporting, and it's good to do this nice and early. And I've got just the thing. Okay then, the thing that we are going to use to support Mr. Philodendron verrucosum here is a trellis trellis. You can use whatever you like, moss poles, planks of wood, or those burlap moss poles that you can get. But I like these trellises because they're quite pretty and they have rubber feet to protect the wood. So a climbing plant such as a Philodendron verrucosum will have a stem and the leaves will face in one direction, that'll be the front. And then out the back will grow the aerial roots, and the aerial roots will grow and attach onto the wood, all being well. So what we want to do is to take our support system, whatever you're using, plonk it into the soil up against the bum of the plants. So I'm just going to adjust that. Don't need to worry about the roots too much. They're more robust than you might think. So there you go, that is up against it. And just for some extra support, while it's learning that the support system is there, you can just tie it on with some Velcro tape. I just got this from Amazon. You want to tie it to the stem and not the petiole or the leaf. So I'm going to tie it on like so. And there you have it. This plant will now use this support system. The arrowroots will hopefully attach to it, and the leaves should start to mature and get bigger as it grows higher and higher. So I've been moved into my new house for about a month now. And it did come with this quite large conservatory that I'm stood in right now, and that meant that I needed extra plants to kind of fill in the space. So I'm in the process of buying more and more plants just to make it extra planty for me. So that means that I've been buying plants during winter online. And you shouldn't really be put off buying plants any time of year, but you can expect to run into some issues in winter because they're traveling in the cold to get to your house. So I've got this Schismatoglottis, which is a right mouthful to say. It's a new plant to me. Looks similar to like a peace lily and Dieffenbachia. But anyway, I unboxed this guy in a video I did for the Patreon page, and it was fine when it got here, but then the next day all the leaves were really droopy. It was kind of sagging all the way down here, so it was obviously thirsty from being cooped up in that box. And I lost a few leaves, so I left this one on just to show you this yellowing leaf here, but I had to pick off a few. But otherwise, it's a healthy plant. I'm not too panicked. It just needs some time to adjust to my house and to recover from traveling in the cold. I also bought this Philodendron Sharoni, which is again a new plant to me. Gorgeous leaf here. But there is some signs of damage on the leaves as it's traveling. It's kind of deteriorating a little bit in my house, but I'm not panicking, Mr. Mannering. Just kind of waiting for it to adjust in my home. So I probably have to let it acclimatise, it lives down there, let it acclimatise for a couple of months before it kind of shows its true beauty. And then I've got an Alocasia here, I can't remember the type of Alocasia, kind of like a cross between a Frydek and a black velvet. But as you can see, there's a leaf there that has gone by the wayside. I can pick that off actually. So that's gone by the wayside. So Alocasias are known for going dormant during winter, so I'm expecting to lose a few leaves, but I'm not going to chuck it out. I'm going to persevere and hopefully it will turn a corner. So in January, particularly in my climate, there is less daylight available. I'm only getting about 7 hours of daylight a day. So that means I need lots of grow lights dotted around my house to keep my plants going over the winter, how I want them to grow. But it does come with a bit of a warning because I've got this Aglaonema sat on this bamboo shelving unit just over here, and I've got a Sansi clip-on 3-headed grow light just sat above it. So I've got one sat above this Nepenthes and 2 above this Aglaonema, and this grow bulb here is too close to the leaves. I didn't really realise how sensitive this Aglaonema would be to having the grow bulbs too close, but you will notice that there is some yellowing and browning right on that leaf that is just directly underneath this bulb. So you can have leaves too close to the light. So what I'll need to do is just lift it up further away. So as a rule, depends on the plant a little bit, but I like to have it at least 20-30 centimeters away from the leaves just to avoid this yellowing and browning. So it's been a few weeks since you put your cutting into some soil, such as this spider plant cutting, a couple of cuttings that I put into this pot of soil. Also got this string of hearts cuttings that I put into here, and also this coleus as well. So how do you know that they have successfully rooted? Well, basically it's dead easy. You want to just gently tug on the cutting that you made. Just gently tug on it. If there's resistance, like it doesn't want to come very easily, then that means there are roots in the soil and you've successfully propagated. Also, just look at the leaves for new growth. That's a bit of an obvious one, if there's lots of new leaves coming through. But sometimes I find that, weirdly, cuttings will grow leaves before they grow roots. Not sure why, but I think in this case, this is successfully rooted because there is resistance when I try to pull these out. Likewise, with these string of hearts cuttings, there's lots of new little growth points coming through, and not all of these have rooted, so I'm not getting much resistance with those cuttings there, but some of them I am. Like that one there, feels like it's rooted successfully. And then my coleus, I took loads of coleus cuttings only 2 weeks ago. This is dead easy to propagate, this plant. But again, when I pull it quite firm, then there is a lot of resistance on all these stems. So it looks like these have all successfully rooted. So I've got a plant here that I've been worried about for the last few months. So this is my Philodendron melanocrisis variegated. You wouldn't know by looking at it because it's lost all its leaves. So it was looking very ropey last year. The stem was very thin. So I thought I would just cut it right back and basically start again by propagating it. So I've got propagations on the go in my propagation box. So they're kind of working. So I didn't really have much high hopes for this guy because it was only the stem left. But the lesson here is that a plant doesn't necessarily need leaves to photosynthesize. It will photosynthesize through the stem. So this guy isn't dead, because you will notice here that there is a new growth point emerging. So this guy is alive and kicking. So it just goes to show that you don't need to worry about cutting a plant right back. As long as there is stem tissue left, it will continue to photosynthesize and carry on living. I'm sure you know by now that one of my favourite things to do is to propagate plants. I'm always at it. So I've got my Peperomia Santorini here, which is an absolutely gorgeous plant. Don't worry about the yellowing leaves at the perimeter of the plant. That always happens with this plant. You can just pick them off, cut them off, and new growth will come, just like so. As long as the top got lots of new leaves coming through, it's all good. So what we can do with this guy, dead easy to propagate because these propagate through the leaves successfully. So all you need to do is to take a leaf like so, and that'll propagate. New roots will grow at the base of the petiole where I cut once I put it into soil, and the new leaves will grow, and it'll grow really quickly as well. So you won't need many. I reckon maybe up to 10, something like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 10. And there you go, 10 leaves cut. Just want to make sure you're choosing nice, healthy leaves that are going to die on you in the process. So we can pop that to one side. I've got a pre-filled pot of soil, just Cybotanica's universal mix. All we need to do is just pop them in, like so. Bury them into the petiole, just so that the leaf is sitting just out of the soil. You can just go around and fill it in. So it might look a bit bare at the moment, but it will soon fill in when new leaves start to grow. They will grow loads of new leaves as well. So just water, don't need to give it too much water because really the leaves are only sat at the top of the pot. So just enough just to dampen the first 2 or 3 inches. That's all I'm doing. There we go. I'll put that somewhere nice and bright, and I reckon within 5 weeks I'll start to see new leaves appearing. I always talk about the power of pruning on my videos, of course, and the chefies over on Patreon would have seen me prune back this bad boy. So a couple of years ago, it was a plant that was growing one stem. This is a Ficus elastica tenecchia. It was growing one stem, and I pruned it back and it branched out into two. And at the end of last summer, I pruned back the two stems that were growing. There was growing there and growing that way. I pruned them both back, and it just shows that even if you do it at the end of summer, it will put out new growth. So there's two new growth points here on this stem, and there was two new growth points on this stem as well. So it just shows that pruning, even towards winter, is perfectly fine. So this guy will be a nice bushy specimen now. So it's going to eventually have 4 stems where there was once one. I have with me here my Alocasia mellow, which is a real bugger to look after because this always happens. The leaves always go yellow. It's a real pain in the bum. See, that one's just come off easily. So I'm going to get it out of the pot and just have a look at the roots. Quite a small root system. So I've had this plant maybe 2 years and it's just not grown much whatsoever. So I'm not really sure why. It does produce new growth. There are some corms in here, which is good to see. And there's a healthy root system, so there's nothing wrong with the roots. My hunch is that maybe it's the wrong potting mix for it. So this is an orchid mix that I put it into a couple of years ago, or maybe when I repotted it a year ago, something like that anyway. And I think it might be a bit too chunky for it, maybe drying out a bit too quickly, because alocasias like to have moist soil, I think. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it back into the same size pot, but instead I'm going to use Cybotanica's universal mix instead of the aroid mix. Okay, so the aroid mix has bits of bark and stuff in it, which is a bit too chunky, whereas the universal mix doesn't have bark in. It just has coconut core with perlite and other bits and pieces, like activated charcoal and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully this will now be a lot happier in this spot. I'm going to put it somewhere nice and bright underneath some grow lights, and hopefully the roots will grow and the leaves will grow as well. The Monstera deliciosa is easily the world's most popular houseplant, and in this house too. I've got loads of them dotted around. The more Monsteras I have, the better. But I've only got one Monstera albo, which is the variegated edition. It's this guy up here growing up this trellis trellis. So this guy is very expensive. This was given to me free in an unboxing video I did last year. Lucky me. But I would like 1 or 2 more of them, so I'm not going to run out and buy one. I'm going to chop it up and propagate it instead. So propagation is dead simple. All you need is your plant and some pruners and then something to put your cuttings in. So I'm going to choose this glass of water that I've pre-filled. All we need to do, I'm going to take a top cutting of this Monstera albo. So all we need to do on the plant is locate the highest node on the plant. You can see that there's an aerial root. So the stem will have a leaf growing forwards out of the stem and then an aerial root coming out of the back, and there'll be a line on the stem. And our job is just to cut underneath there, which will be about there. So that is our cutting. So we've got a node there, and that's where the roots are going to grow out of. And then, because this is a top cutting, there's no need for it to grow a new stem. If I was to take another cutting here of another piece with a leaf on, then it will need to grow a new stem because I've chopped its head off basically. But this guy, once it grows roots, it will just continue to send out leaves from the latest leaf that it grew, which would be from this one here. So we don't need that anymore. That will continue growing. A new stem will sprout, and I'll get it to train on this trellis trellis. So we can pop that to the side there. And this guy, we don't need to do anything really. It's dead simple, anyone can do this. Normally you wouldn't have so much leaf tissue, but I think it should be okay in this instance. I want to keep the leaves because they're nice and variegated with some nice fenestrations in. So all we need to do is just pop it into our glass of water. So that will start rooting in probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. It does depend on the season a little bit. Now that we're in February, it might take a little bit longer. I'm gonna give it some good light where I tend to keep most of my cuttings. And once it grows roots, I'll pot it up into some soil and I'll have a brand new plant in my hands. So I've got over 200 plants in my home, but one of my absolute favourites is this guy. This is a Nepenthes, or a pitcher plant, and if you're not familiar with it, it's a carnivorous plant. So it will grow traps like that one from the end of the leaves, and it contains digestive enzymes. So the insect will come along and try to lick the sweet nectar at the top, fall in and get trapped and then die a horrible death. So the traps on these guys do eventually go by the wayside, as you can see there. So I've got a few on this plant that I need to sort out. Pruning in the Nepenthes is dead easy. Just need some nice clean pruners. These have been washed, not really been sterilised. I don't think that's necessary. Just give them a good clean. So these pitchers, they grow from the ends of the leaves, of course. All we need to do is just go to the very tip of the leaf and just prune off the pitcher like so. We don't want to prune off the entire leaf until it gets to a stage where it's looking a bit ropey and a bit brown, like these two here. So we can pull those off, because these are still photosynthesizing for the plant, giving the plant energy. So we only want to prune off the pitchers. So there's a couple here that I can take off, just on the end of the leaves, like so. So you will end up with a few leaves that don't have pitchers, but that's fine, because new pitchers do always tend to grow out of the top. So these are new pitchers here. There's just one just starting to form out of that new leaf. So is there any crispy brown? So I only tend to prune them when they get very crispy brown, like these ones are. So that one's pretty much gone by the wayside entirely. It's pretty much all brown. I don't prune them off when they're a little bit brown. Like this one here is just starting to turn, just starting to lose some vigour. It's not as red as, say, this one here, but I'm going to leave it because it can still catch its prey and it can still feed nutrients to the plant. So I'm going to leave that one on there. And I think I have pruned all of these pitchers. There's a leaf here that I just want to get rid of. Doesn't want to come out, so I'm going to go in with my snippers. There we go. Just want to cut things like that out, just to tidy up the plant and make sure that improves airflow and all that kind of stuff for the plants. So there's a pitcher there that started to form that's gone brown. So I'm not sure why that is, but I'm going to prune that off. Just get rid of that. There you go. That has tidied up the plant nicely. If you're a subscriber to the channel, then you'll know just how much I hate fungus gnats. And fungus gnats need soil to live in, to procreate, to multiply and conquer your home, which they seem to have around here. But it's driving me up the wall, so I'm contemplating just putting all my plants in a semi-hydro mix, which is leca or pon, or even just perlite, or even just water. But I want to see how certain plants cope being in semi-hydro before I make the move. So I've got this snake plant, Star Canyon Granite it's called, which is a very unusual plant. And snake plants normally don't like to sit in wet soil, do they? They hate having wet feet. So I want to see how this guy will fare in a semi-hydro setup. So this snake plant has been recently potted up into here, so it should be fairly easy to get the soil off the roots. So the idea with transferring to semi-hydro is you want to get rid of all the soil that is knocking around the roots, relatively clean, doesn't need to be absolutely sparkling or anything like that. Just get the clumps off, because the plant is going to be living in basically a reservoir of water and we don't want that going murky brown, so we want to get rid of the soil as much as possible. Which it looks like this is going to be a nice easy job for me, because it was recently, this is a cutting that I took from the mother plant. I separated it into different plantlets. So yeah, that is most of the soil off. You might, if you've got an older plant that you move into leca or pon or something, then you might struggle to get all the soil off the roots. But you just want to take your time, maybe get a stick and kind of poke it through. And then when you got to this kind of stage, you just want to dip it into your sink and clean off the roots, which is what I'm going to do now. So I've now given these a rinse so that most of the dirt is off the roots. There's still bits of dirt on there, so that's not an issue. I'm going to use the same pot. Well, I was going to, but that's a bit dirty, so I might just use a different pot. I might use that one, that's nice and clean. So the important thing is to put it in a plastic pot with holes so that when the plant sits in a reservoir of water, it's able to wick up to the leca and keep the plant hydrated. So it's dead easy to repot a plant into semi-hydro, not nearly as much faffing around as when you're repotting into soil. So you just want to hold the plant more or less where you want it and then just dump in your leca or pond. So this leca has been rinsed by me in the garden just to clean it off, because when the leca is in the bag it's very dusty. Leca is just hardened clay balls, by the way. So you want to clean it off in the garden to stop the soot from the clay going down your drains and potentially blocking your drains. So filling it up near enough to the top. That's about right. Give it a tap just to get the leca all in the nooks and crannies. And that is it. Now you can put it into your decorative pot, like so. And then I did have a jug of water somewhere down here. So you want to fill your cash pot with about a third of the way up, like so. So it'll always sit there, and that'll just keep the leca nice and hydrated for the roots to draw on some water and nutrients. So this water, I've added some hydroponic fertilizer. You want to give it some feed because the plant is solely relying on the water that you give it. So you want to make sure that it has some nutrients available. So I'm now going to keep an eye on how this snake plant does in semi-hydro, and I'll keep you updated. So this is the first year that I've been growing Amaryllis as a houseplant in my home, and I've got to say I'm well impressed because look at these ones, absolutely stunning. So I first brought them to my channel in my November chores video, and if you planted them at the same time as me, then you would have noticed quite quickly that when they shoot up and they start to bloom, they become quite top heavy. Like this one is starting to become quite top heavy, and when they open up they tend to flop right over and you're in danger of breaking the stem. So we need to do something about this ASAP. Now there is 1,000,001 ways that we can support this Amaryllis, but it's just important to get the job done however you're going to do it. It's a little bit awkward for me because mine is living in this terracotta pot, which is a bit of an awkward shape to stick anything in there that I can support with. Because an Amaryllis bulb wants to be quite snug in its pot, which is why I chose this quite small pot. But it leaves me a bit limited on what I can use to support this spike, flowering spike. So what I've chosen are these two bamboo skewers. And what I've been doing, I have been putting one over there and then one here, like so, bringing them together and then tying the Amaryllis to it like so. It's a little bit awkward because of the shape of the pot. That's my excuse anyway. So I've got some green Velcro plant tape. You can just buy it on Amazon, I think, or any other plant shop, I guess. So just need to trim this. I'll probably leave it actually. So I do need 3 hands for this. This is the old spike, by the way, from the old flower that has since gone by the wayside. So I'm going to go on this end like so. The reason I'm using 2 is because if I can't really use 1, because if I use 1 it's still going to be leaning, so I need 2 to create some tension. So that is the method behind the madness. So you just want to wrap it around the stem and the ties. Like I say, you need 3 hands for this. And voila, there you go, that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. So I just have to watch out, because once these open, they tend to flop over, so it might press onto these spikes and it might rip the flowers open or something like that. So I might have to trim these back with some pruners, but I'll keep an eye on that as these open. Job done. Up here on this bamboo shelving unit, I've got a bunch of Monsteras, but I've also got this Monstera cutting. So I actually took this at the beginning of winter, I believe, a few weeks ago, and it's successfully rooted. Nice white roots on there. Some of them are sprouted from the aerial root. So this just goes to show that you can successfully prune and propagate a Monstera or any other plant during winter. As long as you give it enough light and it's not too cold in your house, then it will successfully root. So this guy needs potting on. There are a few things we'll need to get right. So you'll want to pot on your Monstera cutting, or any other cutting really, when the roots are a good couple of inches long at least, which these are. In an ideal world, the Monstera root should be a little bit longer than that. I would have liked to have left it in maybe a week or two longer in that glass, just to develop these roots a little bit further, especially that one there, because that's quite short. But anyway, it should be okay. So I've got a nice clear plastic pot. Choose a nice suitable size for it. So it's a little bit big really for the amount of roots that we have here, but it's quite a big tall cutting. So I'm going to opt for that. I'm going to watch my watering. So that's going to go in there. I'm using Cybotanica's Universal Mix, which you can get a 10% discount off their products with a link in the description to this video. So the first part of the task is to line up the plant like so, and then just dump a load of soil around. It's dead easy. So I like to go around. You want to fill it to cover the roots. You don't want to bury the stem too much, because otherwise that has the potential to rot the stem when you water the plants. But you do want to support it as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act. That seems okay. So the good thing about these clear plastic pots is that you can have a little look around to see if there's any pockets in the soil, which doesn't appear to be there, so that's good. I'm just giving it a little press just to get rid of any air gaps, because it does tend to compress when you add the water. So that is that. And then you want to give it a good drink. So the aim of the game when you're potting up a cutting that is rooted in water is to keep the soil moist for the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. Because this plant has grown water roots, it's not had a chance to adapt to soil, so it needs an adaptation period, which is 2 or 3 weeks, which is why we keep the soil nice and moist for that time period. And then after that time period, just start to wean it off, let it dry out a bit more until you go onto your regular watering schedule for your Monstera. So I'm going to find a decorative pot for this bad boy and put it somewhere nice and bright to start growing stems. Propagating plants is one of the best ways to grow your indoor plant collection for free. But did you know that you can propagate a cactus just as easily as any other houseplant in your collection? So I've got one here that is just right for propagation, and it's dead easy, so let me show you how. So propagating a cactus is dead fun in my book, and dead easy as well. So a cactus like this will grow little pups from the kind of big bulbous plants that are growing from the soil. So these little ones here, basically little pups, aren't they? We can twist these off quite gently with rubber coated tongs like so. So we can do as many as we want. I've got loads on here. I could do probably 10 of them on here. In fact, I might just do 2. Do this bigger one here as well. Just carefully twist it off like so. So I've got 2 there. So we can put that to the side. And now I've got a little pot here filled with Cybotanica's universal mix. I could use a succulent mix or a cacti succulent mix, but I think the universal mix is plenty good enough. And then it's dead simple really. The main issue you have will be trying to stop stabbing yourself. So just make a little indentation in the soil. All you want to do is just rest these on top of the soil. You don't want to bury them, like so. Just press it in. It's a bit tricky with these rubber tongs because the is it the tines? Is that what you call them on a cactus? They want to go into the rubber, which sticks, which is proving to be a little bit trickier. But we will carry on, so we can add the second one next to it. Just holding that carefully. See if I can take these off actually. I can. A little bit dirty, but I want to press it in like so. And I'm just getting the soil just pressed up around it. So that will root just fine like that. No issues whatsoever. So we just want to give it a little dribble of water over the soil just to start the root making magic basically. Like so. Put that somewhere nice and bright on a sunny windowsill. And they'll soon grow much bigger and then you'll have to repot them into a larger size pot. So with spring just around the corner, it's a great time to have a think about how you're going to display your plants for the growing season when they really start to kick on in growth. So I'm in my living room here, and this area behind me is a little bare for my taste. I want it more planty. And if you're a subscriber to the channel and you saw me in my old house, then you would have seen the devil's ivy that I had in my living room that was snaking all around. So I want to achieve a similar thing here. So I've got these plants here on this console table. And I've got these cuttings, 2 cuttings of devil's ivy, and these are actually from the old house, the old devil's ivy that was snaking around the dining room. So these are, I think they're rooted in here, so I'm just waiting for new stems to grow, but I've got them on this console table right in front of this grow light. So the idea is they'll eventually start to grow stems. I'm going to get it to climb up this wall here. I'm going to support it somehow, maybe a trellis trellis or maybe some pins in the wall. And it's going to climb all the way over this doorway and then let's go over there, and who knows where it's going to end up. And then similarly, I've got a Hoya Lisa here, which is the exact same setup I had in my old house, and that is going to grow the other way, just like I had it in my old house. So it's going to be a bit of a jungle vibe here. Not sure what Mrs. Sheffield was going to say about that. I've not run it past her. And then over here, I've got Adansonii over an archway that I want to grow all the way over it. So it's going to really kind of increase the jungle vibe settings of my house. One of the downsides of having a planty YouTube channel is that you sometimes kill a plant inadvertently. So I recently did a care guide on this guy, would you believe, the ZZ plant. And this guy featured in it, and he was loud and proud. He had lots and lots of stems, looking much better than he is now. So in that video, I was showing how to water the plant correctly, and to get lots of shots, I was having to pour quite a lot of water into the soil. This is my excuse, by the way. And I think it's basically given up the ghost from all the water I was giving it. So lots of stems have gone. I mean, look at the state of that one. It's gone complete mushy mess. So there is one stem still standing and it's quite firm. So I'm hoping we'll be able to rescue this bad boy. Right then, this sorry state of a plant. I'm almost scared to go near it, to be honest. God knows what I'm going to find in here. So, just looking in there to see if there's anything dodgy going on, but there isn't. Does smell quite bad. So I'm going to get these bits that have fallen off. There was quite a lot of stems on this plant a few weeks ago, but they've all one by one gone by the wayside and things like that's happened. Not good, but hopefully I can save this. But let's have a look in the pot and see what the damage is. Pop that there. Okay, what have we got? Yep. Roots are just, I mean, that's a rhizome. It's completely burst and gone by the wayside. So that's not good. All of them have. Crumbly mess in here. Aha. There was one good rhizome, which is attached to this stem that is still firm, I think. But the problem is it's a little bit ropey. There it is. So potato-like rhizomes of this plant. That's hanging on by a thread. That's a shame. What to do? There's rotten on the top there. I think what I might do is to rip that off like so. It is starting to rot at the base of the stem just there. So I'm basically going to propagate this plant now. So I'm going to cut it back like so. I'm going to pop that into soil, because that wasn't really usable. Nothing usable in that pot, unfortunately. But these things happen, we live and learn. Don't give your ZZ plant tons of water, even if you're doing it for a video. Okay. So, I'm going to pot it into here. I'm going to propagate this plant basically. So, I did have a pot somewhere, but I've lost it. I'm just going to pop that in there and fill some soil around it. And to save this cutting, I'm going to not water it for maybe even 2 or 3 days. Maybe even longer actually. Because I could have let that cut end callus over, would have been a good idea, especially with a ZZ plant, to let it dry out and heal before adding it to the soil. But the other way of doing that is adding it to the soil and just not watering the soil for a little while, a few days. But I might give that a week or so without watering it, and hopefully that stem piece will grow roots and I can save this plant. So I'm going to put that somewhere nice and bright. Towards the end of last year, I did a plant hacks video, and this guy featured this Peperomia obtusifolia variegated, and in it he had a broken stem. So in that video I showed you how you can put a stick next to a broken stem, put some tape around it as a brace, like a broken arm, and it should heal itself. It looks like that's exactly what's happened here. So if we can take these tape off the stick, take the stick out, and this stem has fully healed itself. So you can see where the broken bit was. It looks like it's hanging on by a thread, but there are new leaves growing out of the top. So it just shows if you've got a stem that you accidentally break, and you don't want to lose it, just put something firm next to it with some plant ties and it should heal itself. At the end of winter, my Tradescantias always look like this. a crispy brown mess. Something to be ashamed about. All the leaves are going crispy brown and falling off. This is just something that happens during winter with this plant. But every year I do the same thing to rejuvenate it, to get it looking its best during spring and summer. Let me show you. Now, if you're not familiar with the Tradescantia, any plant in that family, then these plants are hands down the quickest and easiest plant to propagate, to root. They literally take days, so easy. So we're going to use that to our advantage to reset this plant. So you could mess around trying to cut it back and trying to save it, but what I like to do, I like to start afresh by taking lots of these cuttings. So I'm not really thinking about it too much. I'm just locating some healthy stems with some healthy leaves and cutting some nice pieces off. So I'm going to go through and do that quickly. Okay, now that we have got lots of our cuttings, we don't need to throw that away. We could go further and clean it right back, maybe even cut it right back and save that, and it will grow new stems. Might look a little bit ropey though. But we've got our nice fresh cuttings here. And the next stage, so we've got a nice long piece there. The next stage is just to remove some of the lower leaves, like so. Okay, so they've been stripped of their lower leaves now, and we do that because we're going to add these to the soil, and we don't want the lower leaves to be rotting in the soil and causing problems for our cuttings. So I've got a nice pot of soil here with Cybertanica's Universal Mix. So just to make adding these a little bit easier, I'm just going to moisten the top of the soil. Not too much, I don't want water to go all over my table. And then I've got a trusty chopstick here. Just make a little hole and pop the cutting into the soil. Press around, and we just do this with all our cuttings, filling the pot nice and full, and then we've got a brand new plant, and it'll continue to grow more stems, more leaves throughout the spring and summer. So I've got the last two here now, so I am cramming this pot nice and full, because the fuller a Tradescantia pot is, the better. And this pot will look much nicer than the original plant. It only takes a week for these to start rooting in here. Just going to trim that back so that this goes in properly. Get rid of those lower leaves. Like so. So I've already watered the pot. Now we can switch out the old pot that was in a decorative pot. I can pop it in there, and that's it, as if nothing ever happened. Brand new plant, perfect. Now this is a plant that I've been doting on for a good year or so, maybe even longer. This is my Ficus elastica tineki, which is a beautiful plant with variegated leaves. And I've been doting on him, so I've been trying to get him to branch out into a tree-like structure, a magnificent beast I want him to be. So he's got lots of stems now, where I've just continually pruned him back. But the problem with this guy, the poor fella, is that I overwatered him. I did the unthinkable. I've been watering him without checking the soil. When I eventually did check, because I knew something wasn't quite right with this plant, the root ball and the soil was absolutely sopping wet. This was a little while ago, maybe a couple of months ago, and it took him a good month, maybe even longer, to dry out the soil. And it's showing me his displeasure by the leaves going brown on the edges. which is a real shame. So I'm going to probably lose these leaves. The top growth is still fine. That's coming out nice. So it is on the road to recovery, but these lower leaves have unfortunately gone brown on the edges. So there is only one thing for it. So to stop this plant from being too ugly, I think I'm going to have to prune some of these leaves off, which is a bit of a shame. I'm a bit worried that once I prune these brown leaves off, it's going to be looking a little bit bare. But we can see how it looks. So when you're pruning a Ficus elastica of any type, it will bleed this white sap, which I actually forgot about before I started pruning. So hopefully it's not going to drip everywhere. But if you're sensitive, if you've got sensitive skin or anything like that, falling off my chair, then it might be a good idea to wear some latex gloves or something. I'm not too sensitive though to things like that. That one might drip over me though. Okay. Is there any more that need pruning off? I might prune that one off. Okay, so I have pruned off the worst offenders and it is dripping that white sap all over my table, but I'll give it a clean, no worries. So it is looking a bit bare in places, but I think I might be able to get away with it because once this plant gets nice and tall, which hopefully it will in the next few years, then I might want to defoliate these leaves anyway to stop it looking a bit silly with these lower leaves at the bottom and then quite bushy at the top as well. So I might want to defoliate these anyway. You can of course just leave these on the plant because they will continue to photosynthesize, but I just don't like the look of them on my plant, making it look a bit ugly. So I'm going to pop this back once it stops bleeding on me. Well, that's it for this video. Do let me know the jobs that you're doing to your houseplants at this time of year. If you want to see more videos in this series, then click on the link here and I'll see you there.